I got the invitation in the mail and froze, just stood there in the kitchen with my coffee going cold in my hand, staring at the cream-colored envelope like it was some kind of joke or maybe a mistake, but my name was written in bold, elegant script on the front, and when I flipped it over and slid the card out, I felt something shift in my chest, something heavy and sharp and slow like the edge of a blade dragging across old scar tissue. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Daniel Brooks and Emily Carter," it read, and my vision blurred just a little as I read it again and again, trying to make it make sense, but the names didn't change. My brother Daniel and my ex-girlfriend Emily, the woman I had once planned to marry, were getting married to each other, and I hadn't heard a damn thing about it until this moment. I must have stood there for 10 minutes before I moved, before I remembered to breathe, and then I was pacing the floor, muttering things like, "No, this has to be a mistake. He couldn't, not her, not Emily, because that would mean he knew that he had crossed a line I didn't think he was even capable of stepping near, let alone over, and yet here I was holding the proof in my hands." I called him, didn't even hesitate, just hit his name in my contacts and waited with my heart pounding in my ears like I was calling 911 or something, and when he answered with that casual, clueless, "Hey, man, I swear I saw red." "You're marrying Emily?" I asked, no greeting, no build-up, just the question straight out of my gut, and there was a long pause on the other end, too long, the kind of pause that tells you everything before the words even come. "Yeah," he said finally, and I could hear the tension, the hesitation, like he was bracing for a reaction he knew he deserved. "I was gonna tell you, Nate, I just didn't know how to bring it up." "Didn't know how to bring it up," I repeated, laughing once, bitter and disbelieving. "You're engaged to the woman I was with for 3 years, Dan, the woman I almost proposed to, and you thought a goddamn invitation in the mail would be a good icebreaker." "I didn't plan for it to happen," he said quickly. "We reconnected a few months ago, things clicked, man, I didn't mean to hurt you." But that's the thing about betrayal, it's never about what people mean to do, it's about what they choose to do, and Daniel, my own brother, had chosen to build a future with the woman who broke my heart, and hadn't thought it was worth even a phone call before now. "Does Mom know?" I asked, my voice tight, and he sighed. "Yeah," he said, "she told me I should talk to you, but I was worried it'd blow up like this." "You were right," I said, and I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how Emily used to lie with her head on my chest, how we'd talk about someday getting a place by the lake, how she used to say no one knew her like I did, and now she was marrying my brother like none of it had mattered, like I was just a stepping stone to get to the next best thing. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure if I was more angry at her or at him, because Emily and I had ended things messy. Yeah, but I never hated her. I always thought we might have circled back to each other someday, and Daniel, he was my brother, my best friend growing up, the guy who stood up for me when I got jumped in middle school, the guy who shared everything with me until, apparently, he decided to share her too. Days passed, and I ignored every message he sent, every call, every "can we talk" text, because I didn't know what I'd say that wouldn't come out as fire and ash, and I couldn't stomach the idea of facing him until the hurt stopped feeling like an open wound. But it didn't stop, it just shifted, settled into this dull, constant throb that made everything feel off, like my life had been tilted just slightly and nothing would ever sit quite right again. Then the wedding date crept closer, and my mom called, her voice soft and careful the way it always got when she was walking across emotional minefields, and she said, "I know this is hard, Nate, but you should come, not for them, for me, for the family." I didn't say anything for a long time, just listened to her breathing, waiting, hoping, and finally I said, "Do you think they love each other?" And she was quiet before she said, "I think they do." Which wasn't an answer, not really, but it was enough to get me to start packing a bag the night before the wedding, to book a last-minute flight and show up in the small-town church where I grew up, where I'd once imagined standing with Emily and promising forever, only now I'd be sitting in the crowd while she said those words to my brother. I kept to the back, wore a dark suit that didn't draw attention, sat near the exit like maybe I'd change my mind and leave halfway through, but I didn't. I watched as Daniel stood at the altar with that nervous smile, watched as the music started and everyone stood. And then she walked in. Emily. She looked almost exactly the same, soft curls, delicate smile, eyes scanning the room, and then she saw me, and something in her face changed, just for a moment, like the air had been knocked out of her lungs, like she hadn't expected me to come, and suddenly I wasn't sure why I had. She kept walking, but she looked back once, just before she reached the altar, and I saw it, clear as day, a flicker of something that didn't belong in a bride walking toward her groom. Regret. After the ceremony, there was a reception at a local hall, and I stayed just long enough to keep my mother from worrying, but as soon as people started dancing and clinking glasses, I slipped outside, lit a cigarette even though I'd quit a year ago, and leaned against the wall wondering what the hell I was doing there. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, soft and hesitant, and then her voice, low and trembling. "Nate," she said. I didn't turn around. "Why did you come?" she asked, and I finally looked at her. Her eyes were shining, but not from happiness. And that's when she whispered the words that cracked me open all over again. "I shouldn't have married him," she said. "I still love you." I stood there like I'd been punched in the gut, not because her words were shocking exactly, but because some part of me had been bracing for them since the second I saw her walk down that aisle, and hearing them now, hearing her say she still loved me right after marrying my brother, was like stepping back into a dream I'd already mourned, already buried, and now it was clawing its way back to the surface like it had never really died at all. "You still love me," I repeated quietly, more to myself than to her, and when I looked at her, I saw tears forming in the corners of her eyes, the kind she used to try and hide from me when we fought, when she was scared she'd said too much or not enough. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them, like the weight of her dress and her decision was too much to carry all of a sudden, and I hated that part of me still wanted to reach for her, still wanted to fix whatever this was, still wanted to believe there was a version of this where we could go back. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered, and I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only sound I could make that didn't feel like screaming. "Yeah, well," I said, shaking my head, "I wasn't going to, but then I figured I'd regret not showing up more than I'd regret standing in the back of a church watching you marry my brother." She winced when I said it like that, and I knew it was cruel, but I wasn't in the mood to soften the edges of the truth, not after everything, not when I was the one left standing in the ruins while she got to dress it up like a fairy tale. "I didn't plan any of this," she said, voice tight. "When we broke up, I thought we were really over, Nate. You stopped answering my messages, you just disappeared, and I disappeared because it hurt too much to stay," I interrupted, stepping closer. "You said you needed space, Emily, and then you filled it with someone else, with him, and I couldn't breathe with that image in my head, couldn't even open my phone without wondering if I'd see you together somewhere, smiling like none of it meant anything." Her lip trembled and she looked away, like maybe she couldn't face what I was saying, or maybe she knew I was right and it was easier to pretend she didn't. "I didn't mean to fall for him," she said finally. "I was lonely, confused, and Dan was there, he was kind, and for a while it felt safe, like I could move on." "Then why are you here right now?" I asked, my voice low. "Why are you standing out here in a wedding dress telling me you still love me?" She looked at me like she didn't know the answer herself, and for a long second, all I could hear was the muffled music drifting through the walls behind us, laughter and clinking glasses, like a celebration was happening in some alternate reality where none of this pain existed. "Because I thought I could let you go," she said finally. "I thought if I said yes to him, I'd stop looking for you in every room I walked into. I thought I'd stop waking up wondering if you were okay, if you ever thought about me, but it didn't work, Nate, it never stopped, none of it stopped." I closed my eyes and took a breath, long and shaky, because her words were everything I'd wanted to hear for years, but now they felt like gasoline poured over already burning wreckage, too little, too late, and way too dangerous. "You married him, Emily," I said, opening my eyes again. "You said vows, you kissed him in front of God and everyone we've ever known, and now what? You want to undo all of it because I showed up in the back of the room looking like a ghost you forgot to bury." She flinched again, and I hated how good it felt to make her feel even a fraction of what I'd been carrying, hated that I still loved her enough to want her to hurt just so I wouldn't be alone in it. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said softly. "I just needed you to know that I never stopped loving you, that it wasn't about choosing him over you, it was about thinking you were gone for good, and trying to survive that loss the only way I knew how." I stared at her, torn between wanting to believe her and wanting to protect whatever was left of my pride, because the truth was, I had been gone. I'd walked away without a word because the idea of staying friends, of watching her move on, had felt impossible, unbearable, and maybe I'd made it easier for her to slip into something new without ever really closing the door on us. "I don't know what you expect me to do with this," I said, voice rough. "You think I'm supposed to stand here and what, tell you I love you too and we'll run away together like none of this ever happened?" "No," she said quickly, "I don't expect anything, I needed to say it out loud, needed you to hear it from me, not from anyone else, because no matter what happens next, I couldn't go the rest of my life pretending I didn't feel this." I looked at her then, really looked, and saw the mess behind the makeup, the panic behind her eyes, the same uncertainty I'd felt every day since we broke up, and it hit me all at once. She was just as lost as I was, just hiding it better. I loved you so much, I said, almost a whisper, and for a long time I thought maybe that was the problem, that I loved you more than you loved me, and I couldn't figure out how to stop. She reached for me then, fingers brushing my sleeve like she was afraid I'd pull away, and part of me wanted to walk back into the night and never look back, but I didn't move. I just stood there and let her touch me, let myself feel it again for 1 second. You didn't love me more, she said, you just showed it louder. That broke something in me. I turned away, not because I couldn't face her, but because I didn't trust myself not to do something stupid like kiss her, or tell her I forgave her, or ask her to leave him and come with me, because as much as I wanted all those things, I knew what it would mean, not just for us, but for Daniel, for our family, for the wreckage it would cause. I can't do this, I said, not like this, not now. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes, and for a moment neither of us said anything, just stood there with 1,000 words unsaid between us. I'm sorry, she whispered, then turned and walked back into the building, into the life she'd just promised to share with my brother. And I was left outside in the dark, wondering if the hardest part of love wasn't losing someone, but watching them choose someone else while still loving you too. I didn't go back inside, couldn't bring myself to face the music, the dancing, the fake smiles and well-wishers, not after what had just happened out there in the dark, not after hearing her say she still loved me with his ring on her finger and his name now legally tied to hers, so I walked, hands deep in my pockets, down the empty sidewalk that led away from the reception hall and into the quiet of the town I grew up in. It was strange how everything looked the same, the diner on the corner, the library steps where we used to meet after school, even the streetlights that always buzzed slightly in the summer heat, and yet nothing felt the same, like the whole town had moved on without me while I got stuck in a loop of what-ifs and old ghosts that refused to stay buried. I ended up at the park, the one by the lake where Emily and I had spent so many nights back when everything was still simple, before words like distance and timing and other people started poisoning the air between us, and I sat on the same bench where she once told me she thought we were soulmates. I remember laughing at her, not because I didn't believe it, but because I did, so much it scared me. Now it just felt like the punchline to a bad joke. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a second I thought about ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to look, and when I pulled it out, I saw Daniel's name lighting up the screen. Of course. I stared at it for a long second, thumb hovering over the decline button, but I didn't press it. I answered. Hey, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Where are you? He asked, sounding somewhere between concerned and pissed. You disappeared right after the ceremony. Mom's been asking about you, and Emily's been weird. I almost laughed, but it came out more like a scoff. Yeah, I bet she has, I said, eyes fixed on the water. I needed some air, man. That cool with you? There was a pause, and then he said something that caught me off guard. You still love her, don't you? It felt like the breath got knocked out of me, not because I didn't expect him to ask eventually, but because he said it like he already knew the answer, like he'd known for a long time and just didn't want to admit it until now. I don't know what you want me to say, I said quietly. Try the truth, he replied, and for once, he didn't sound like my brother. He sounded like a man trying to hold together something that was already falling apart. I didn't answer right away, just let the silence stretch between us like a rope pulled tight, and finally I said, yeah, I still love her. The words sat there between us like broken glass, sharp and painful and impossible to ignore. He didn't speak for a while, and I could almost picture him on the other end, jaw clenched, probably pacing back and forth in some hallway while the reception carried on behind him like nothing was wrong. I figured, he said finally, his voice low, I saw the way she looked at you. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the bench, and let the guilt settle in like a weight across my shoulders. Dan. I didn't come here to ruin anything, I said. I didn't even know how I felt until I saw her again, and then she told you, he cut in, not a question, just a fact, and I sighed. Yeah, I said, she told me. Silence again, thicker this time, heavier, and then he said something I wasn't prepared for. Do you want her back? I froze, heart thudding like a drum in my chest, because how do you answer a question like that when it comes from your own brother, your own flesh and blood, the guy who used to share bunk beds with you and split Halloween candy and swear you'd never let a girl come between you? I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants to scream yes, but another part knows it's too late, that what we had was something beautiful once, but it's gone, and maybe trying to revive it would just ruin whatever good is left. He didn't say anything, just breathed into the phone for a few seconds, and then said, she told me she loved you once, back when we first started seeing each other. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured it was just leftover feelings, ghosts. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. But when I saw you today, saw the way she froze the moment you walked in, I knew, he continued, she's still in love with you, and I think maybe I've known that the whole time, just didn't want to face it. I ran a hand through my hair, everything in me tightening with each word he said. You didn't deserve this, I said, voice low. I'm sorry, Dan, I mean that. He chuckled, bitter and tired. Yeah, well, maybe I did, he muttered. I mean, what kind of man marries his brother's ex without talking to him first? I didn't have an answer for that, because deep down, I'd asked myself the same thing 1,000 times since the day I opened that invitation. Look, he said, voice quieter now, more honest, I don't know what happens next, I don't even know if I can stay married to someone who's in love with another man, but I needed to hear it from you, I needed to know if what I was feeling was real. I'm not going to be the reason your marriage falls apart, I said firmly, whatever she feels, whatever I feel, you two made a choice today, and I'm not going to interfere with that. But it already is falling apart, he said, and it's not your fault, Nate, it's mine for pretending this wasn't always there, right under the surface. There was nothing left to say after that, not really, so we just sat in silence, two brothers caught in a storm neither of us knew how to escape from, both loving the same woman and hating what it was doing to us. Eventually, he said he had to go back inside, and I told him I'd see him later, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, long after the streetlights flickered on and the crickets started their nighttime song, just staring out over the lake, wondering if there was a version of this story where no one ended up hurt, where love didn't come with a body count. I thought about Emily, about the look in her eyes, the way her voice cracked when she said my name, and I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But what I didn't know yet was that the real twist hadn't even happened. Not until the next morning, when I woke up to a knock on my motel room door, and opened it to find her standing there. No makeup, no dress, just Emily. And in her hand, a packed duffel bag. I left him, she said, voice shaking. And just like that, everything changed. I stood there, frozen, one hand still on the door, staring at her like maybe I was still dreaming, like maybe this was some twisted continuation of the nightmare that started the day I got that wedding invitation, but no, she was real, standing in front of me in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, no makeup, eyes red from crying or maybe from not sleeping, her duffel bag hanging heavy from one shoulder like the weight of 1,000 regrets. You left him. I repeated, barely above a whisper, because part of me still couldn't believe she was here, and the other part was already panicking, trying to figure out what this meant, what I was supposed to say, what I was supposed to feel. She nodded slowly, her lips pressed together like she was trying not to fall apart right there in the hallway, and I stepped aside without saying another word, just held the door open and let her in, because no matter how complicated this was, I couldn't leave her standing out there like that, not after everything. She walked past me quietly, dropped her bag near the edge of the bed, and sat down like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore, like she'd been running on adrenaline for too long and it had finally run out. I didn't plan to, she said after a long silence, but after last night, after seeing you, after everything, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending, not even for a day. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to keep my breathing steady, because my mind was spinning in 100 directions, and every one of them ended in disaster. What did he say? I asked, already imagining the look on Daniel's face when she told him, already feeling the guilt tighten around my throat. He didn't fight me, she said quietly, he just stood there, quiet, like he already knew what I was going to say before I said it. That didn't surprise me. Dan had always been sharper than he let on, he played the easygoing, loyal guy, the one everyone liked, but underneath that charm was a man who read people like books, and when it came to Emily and me, I think he'd been reading between the lines the whole time. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, voice trembling, I couldn't stay in that house, with those lies, with the guilt, with him, when all I could think about was you, about what I said last night, and how I meant every word of it. Emily, I started, but she shook her head quickly. You don't have to say anything, she said, I'm not asking you to fix this, or to tell me you still love me, or that we can just pick up where we left off. I know how messed up this is, I know, but I needed to be here, with you, even if just for today, because if I didn't come now, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked away, blinking fast, and for a second I felt the years between us collapse, all the distance, all the pain, all the unspoken things finally bleeding into the open. I walked over slowly, sat beside her on the edge of the bed, close enough to feel her shoulder brush mine, but not touching, not yet, not until I knew what this meant. "I loved you, I said softly, more than anything, and when you left, I felt like the air got sucked out of the room and never came back." She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and raw, and I continued. "And now you're here, and I want to believe this is real. I want to believe we can start over, but I also don't want to be the guy who blew up his brother's life because he couldn't let go of a memory." She nodded slowly, and I could see the understanding in her face, the ache, the guilt, but also something deeper, hope, maybe, or desperation, I wasn't sure. "I'm not asking you to be that guy," she said. "I'm not here because I want to cause more pain. I'm here because I've already caused enough of it by pretending I didn't love you anymore, by lying to myself and to him and to you, and I can't do it anymore, Nate, I can't." I reached for her hand, instinctively, and she didn't pull away, just let her fingers intertwine with mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, and maybe it still was, maybe it always had been. We sat there like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding on, two people standing at the edge of something terrifying and unfamiliar, and then I said the thing I'd been afraid to say since the moment I saw her again. "I never stopped loving you either," I whispered. Her breath hitched, and when she looked at me, I saw something break open inside her, something that had been locked away for far too long. And then she leaned in, slowly, hesitantly, and I met her halfway, because I couldn't stop myself, because everything in me had been waiting for this moment, even when I told myself I wasn't. The kiss wasn't fireworks or movie perfect, it was messy, soft, aching, like we were both remembering how to breathe again after years underwater. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and whispered, "What do we do now?" That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you've just torn through the lives of people you love, chasing something that might not survive the daylight? "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we figure it out, one step at a time, no more hiding, no more pretending." She nodded against me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. But peace doesn't last long when you've broken hearts to get it. Because an hour later, while she was in the shower and I was staring at the ceiling trying to figure out how we tell the rest of the world what happened, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, expecting maybe a maid or someone from the front desk. It was Daniel. He looked tired, eyes rimmed red, jaw tight, like he hadn't slept either, and he didn't say anything at first, just looked past me into the room, like he already knew she was there. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me, and we stood face to face in that narrow motel hallway, two brothers on opposite ends of a choice neither of us wanted to make. "So," he said finally, "it's really happening." I didn't lie, didn't deflect. "Yeah," I said, "it is." He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the floor, and for a second I thought he might hit me, might scream or cry or do something to release the pressure that had clearly been building in him for weeks, months maybe. But he didn't. He just looked up at me with that same sad, resigned look I'd seen in the mirror too many times and said, "Take care of her, Nate, because if you don't, I swear to God I'll never forgive you." Then he turned and walked away. And I stood there, heart pounding, wondering if any of us would ever really be okay again. I stood there in that hallway long after Daniel walked away, the door closed behind me, her in the shower humming something soft and familiar, and all I could think about was what it must have cost him to say what he said, to look me in the eye and tell me to take care of the woman who, just 24 hours ago, was still wearing his ring and promising forever. There was no part of this that didn't feel like betrayal, no part of it that didn't twist something inside me, because even though Emily was here now, even though she chose me, the truth was, we crossed a line that couldn't be erased, and no amount of love or history would make that easier to live with. I went back inside, slow, quiet, like maybe the air was heavier now, and sat on the edge of the bed again, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together like I was waiting for something to fall from the sky and tell me what the hell I was supposed to do with all this. When the bathroom door opened and Emily stepped out, hair damp, wrapped in one of the motel towels, she looked at me like she could already tell something had shifted. "Was that him?" she asked softly. I nodded without looking up. "What did he say?" I exhaled slowly, trying to find the words, but nothing sounded right in my head, so I just told her the truth, straight and plain. "He told me to take care of you, or he'd never forgive me." Her face crumpled a little, like hearing it out loud made it real, made it irreversible, and she sat down beside me again, this time even closer, our legs touching, and for a moment neither of us said a word. "He didn't yell?" she asked, voice small. "No," I said, "he looked like a man who already lost." She swallowed hard and nodded, staring at the floor. We spent the rest of that day in the motel room, wrapped in a kind of silence that wasn't heavy, just necessary, like we were letting the world slow down long enough for us to breathe again, even if we both knew it wouldn't last. She ordered food, barely touched it, and we took turns trying to make sense of what came next, but there were too many unknowns, too many people who were going to get hurt no matter what choice we made. By evening, she lay curled on the bed beside me, head resting on my chest, and she whispered, "Do you think it's possible to do the right thing, after doing everything wrong?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know. The next morning we left the motel early, before the sun really had time to stretch across the sky, and we drove with no real destination, just away, past town lines and farms and gas stations that all blurred together until we finally pulled into a small lakeside Airbnb she found on her phone. It was quiet, tucked away in the woods, like the world couldn't find us if it tried, and for a few days, we stayed hidden, pretending we were two people who hadn't lit a fire behind them. But pretending only works for so long. It started with the calls, dozens of them, missed ones from Daniel, from my mom, from Emily's sister, from mutual friends who'd been at the wedding and now wanted answers no one was ready to give. Neither of us answered. We weren't ready. But silence has a way of creating its own narrative, and within a week, the text started coming in, sharper now, colder, the kind that said things like, "How could you do this to him?" And, "You two deserve each other," and, "I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond to most of them, but one night, after too many glasses of cheap red wine and a long stretch of Emily crying in the dark beside me, I finally picked up a call from my mom. She didn't yell. That's what scared me most. She just said, "Your brother's heartbroken, Nathan, and I'm trying to understand what the hell happened between you and that girl to make you forget who you are." I didn't have an answer she wanted to hear. All I said was, "I didn't forget. I just couldn't lie anymore." And then she hung up. I sat outside after that, watching the trees sway under the stars, thinking about how much damage love could do when it wasn't handled right, when it came back like a storm instead of a sunrise. Emily joined me a little while later, barefoot, her sweater draped around her shoulders, and she sat in the chair beside me, staring at the dark water just beyond the porch. "I think I have to talk to him," she said suddenly. I turned to her, eyebrows raised. "He deserves more than silence," she continued, voice tight, "and maybe he hates me forever, maybe he never forgives either of us, but I can't keep hiding like a coward while he's back there picking up the pieces of something I broke." I nodded slowly, not because I wanted her to go, but because she was right. "I'll come with you," I said, but she shook her head. "No, this one's mine," she said, "you've already paid enough for both of us." She left the next morning. I didn't ask what she was going to say, and she didn't tell me. She just kissed me softly at the door, held my face in her hands like it might be the last time, and said, "Wait for me, please." And then she was gone. The hours passed slow, heavy, and by evening I couldn't sit still, kept pacing the floor of the cabin, checking my phone every 10 minutes, hoping for something, anything. Finally, around midnight, she texted. I talked to him. He said what he needed to say. I cried a lot. So did he. "I'm coming back, if you still want me." And something inside me cracked open again, not with pain this time, but relief. I texted back, "Always." When she returned the next morning, she looked exhausted but clear, like something in her had finally settled, and I wrapped my arms around her the second she walked in, held her so tight she laughed and said I was crushing her. We didn't talk much about what Daniel said, some things weren't meant to be shared, but I could see it in her eyes, the sadness, the loss, the weight of knowing you can't undo the damage no matter how pure your intentions might be now. We stayed in that cabin for a few more days, just the two of us, and for the first time, it started to feel like maybe we could build something again, not from the ashes of what we destroyed, but from the truth we were finally brave enough to hold on to. Still, part of me knew the hardest part hadn't come yet. Because healing isn't instant, and forgiveness doesn't come just because you want it. And one night, as we lay in bed, her head on my chest again, she whispered, "You think he'll ever speak to us again?" I stared at the ceiling, thinking of Daniel, of all the years between us, of the loyalty we once swore would never be broken. "I don't know," I said, "but if he doesn't, I'll understand, because you don't just get to win after taking something from someone else." She didn't say anything after that. She just held my hand tighter. And we both knew there were no real winners in this story. Only people trying not to drown in the choices they made. It's been 3 months since the day she walked into that motel room, and not a single morning has passed where I haven't looked over at her sleeping beside me and wondered how the hell we got here, how something so broken could still find a shape that felt like peace. We moved into a small apartment just outside the city, nothing fancy, nothing big, but it's ours, and every little imperfection in it feels like a reminder that we're building something new, something real, not perfect, but honest. Emily got a part-time job at a local bookstore, and I went back to working freelance design jobs, enough to pay rent, keep the lights on, and give us something close to normalcy. But normal is a strange word when you've been through what we've been through. Because there are still days when I wake up and expect to see Daniel's name on my phone, or hear my mom's voice asking me if I'm ready to come home for Sunday dinner, and I remember, again, that those doors haven't been opened, not yet. I haven't spoken to my brother since the day he walked away from me in that motel hallway. Not once. And I don't blame him. There are some things you don't fix with time or apologies, some betrayals that stay lodged in the skin like a shard of glass too deep to pull out without making everything worse. Still, I keep hoping. Sometimes I'll draft messages to him, long ones, short ones, half-finished sentences that never get sent. Just last week, I typed, "I miss you. I still don't know how to forgive myself, but I think about you every day." And then I deleted it. Because what would I even say that could make it right? What could I possibly offer that wouldn't sound like guilt trying to dress itself up as redemption? Emily doesn't push me about it. She's given me space to carry that weight how I need to, and I try to do the same for her, because I know she still wakes up some mornings with red eyes and doesn't talk about what she dreamed, and I don't ask. We both made choices that cost us people we loved. That kind of loss doesn't disappear, it just gets quieter. But love changes everything. It doesn't erase the damage, but it gives it meaning, it roots you in something deeper than pain. And even now, with everything that's happened, I know I'd still choose her. Even if the world never forgave us. We were sitting on the fire escape one night, just the two of us, watching the lights from the city flicker like they were trying to say something we couldn't quite hear, and she turned to me, her voice soft. "Do you ever wish we could go back?" I looked at her, really looked at her, bare feet tucked under her legs, hair messy from the wind, eyes searching mine like maybe I held the answer she was too afraid to name. And I said, "No. I just wish we hadn't waited so long to be honest." She smiled, sad and small, and leaned her head on my shoulder. "I still think about him," she admitted, "about the life I almost had, and how close I came to living a life forever." "I think about him too," I said, "every day." We sat there for a while, no more words needed, just the weight of our past resting quietly between us. Then, one Sunday morning, it happened. I was at the market picking up groceries, she wanted oranges and I wanted to surprise her with those little pastries she liked, and as I rounded the corner by the dairy section, I saw him. Daniel. Standing there, arm extended toward a carton of milk, looking just the same and completely different all at once. Older maybe, or maybe just tired. He saw me before I could duck away, and for a split second, we just stood there, frozen in time, like two ghosts meeting in the living world by accident. Then he walked toward me. Slow, deliberate steps, not angry, not cold, just steady. "Hey," he said, and his voice cracked on that one word. "Hey," I echoed, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might shake the shelves. We stood face to face, in front of the yogurt aisle, and neither of us knew what to say first. "I heard you two moved in together," he said after a moment, eyes not judging, just tired. "Yeah," I said, "we did." Another pause. He nodded slowly, then said something I didn't expect. "She's happier now. I can see it in the picture she doesn't know I still look at." I swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dan," I said, barely above a whisper. "I swear, I didn't plan for any of this, it just happened." "I know," he said quietly, "that's the part that hurts the most." We stood there in that aisle, surrounded by strangers and bright lights and the low hum of refrigerator fans, and somehow it felt like the most private moment I'd ever lived through. He finally sighed, rubbed his jaw, and said, "You know what the worst part was?" "What?" "That for a long time, I thought I was the safe choice, the backup plan, the one she settled for when you were gone," he said, eyes sharp now, voice heavy, and maybe that was true, or maybe I just wasn't enough for the version of her that came back to me. "Dan," I started, but he held up a hand. "I don't need you to explain," he said, and I'm not here to make peace, not today, but I needed to see you, to look you in the eye and know that you're not hiding anymore. I nodded slowly, chest tight. I'm not, I said, not anymore. He nodded once, then turned to walk away, and for a second I thought that was it, that we'd just had our one conversation for the next 10 years. But just before he reached the end of the aisle, he stopped, looked back, and said, "Take care of her," like I couldn't. And then he was gone. I stood there for a while, staring at nothing, then grabbed the oranges, the pastries, and checked out. When I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, hair pulled back, eyes lighting up when she saw me. "I got your favorites," I said, handing her the bag. She smiled and pulled me down beside her, resting her head on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "I saw Daniel today." She froze for a second, then looked up at me slowly. "And?" "We talked," I said, "not much, but enough." She didn't say anything for a long time, just reached for my hand and held it tight. And in that silence, I realized something. Some things you don't fix. You just learn how to carry them better. You learn to love with the scar, not despite it. You find peace in the truth, even if it came too late to save everyone. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you still get to choose each other. Even after the storm.